Women of Power podcast is a platform for passionate and influential women who are catalysts for change, pioneers in their fields, the change makers, the trailblazers, performers and influencers, driven entrepreneurs and professionals. They play a vital role in driving economic growth and bridging the talent shortages across organizations of various scales. Building cause-based businesses to create positive impact in their communities and towards sustainable goals for the people, planet, and prosperity. In every industry, women are shattering barriers and strive to create a space where they can exhibit their achievements and motivate other women to unleash their limitless potential. We encourage collaboration, networking, and knowledge sharing among women. Let's inspire and learn from one another while sharing our valuable experiences. Thank you for joining us and listening to this episode. Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another episode of Women of Power. These women play a vital role in driving economic growth and bridging talent shortages across organizations of various scales. So, Women of Power, I salute you. Welcome to this episode. This episode is my guest is an influential, a trailblazer, and a woman of power herself, Dr. Pauline Crawford. She is a visionary leader, British-born, founder and chief vision officer of Corporate Heart International. She's also president of Rotary Club of Global Impact, also esteemed position of G100 Global Chair for Positive Masculinity. Dr. Crawford is recognized as an accomplished international speaker and author of The Power of Authentic Harmony. That's her book. And Dr. Pauline Crawford, she's also known as Conversation Game Changer. I had wonderful conversations with Dr. Pauline, as fondly I call her Dr. Pauline, and I will love to have her tell about herself, her book, Power of Authentic Harmony, and a wonderful conversation ahead. Dr. Pauline, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ritu. This is wonderful to be here. And I love the idea of passionate women, women of substance, women who don't have a problem in the world, but of course we know there are problems, but I think it's wonderful to be inspirational for other women to really understand the crossroads that I believe we're at the moment, where we can create a world of harmony. And my book, The Power of Authentic Harmony, the subline is magical conversations that transform our world. And that is very critical for me because, as we know, women are very important in the world, but half of the world is men, half the world is women. So the idea of harmony has to be that you have several voices together in order to create harmony. So although we want to let our voices be heard, my mission is to help us understand the voices together with men across the whole world. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you.
I am equally excited. As you mentioned, magical conversations. So I'm sure our listeners and audiences would be interested in what are those magical conversations about, and we will get into it. And I just want to just piggyback on your passion about having that harmony brought into not only just in our behavior, in our conversation, which lead to our behavior, right? So this is so much need of the time as we go. There's so much chaos in every aspect of life we could see,
Absolutely.
as we record this episode today, we have fires, landslides, and so much is happening. People's lives are disrupted and they have to rebuild. First of all, it's just the traumatic experience they go through.
Yes,
So, no matter how we look at harmony, either in conversation or in our behavior or towards each other, harmony is the key.
absolutely. And it's very important, as you say today, because we're facing so many challenges. So it's also almost being in harmony with yourself in order to understand the chaos that's around us. One of the things that I really felt with harmony is that it's a necessary magic. The idea with a magical conversation is that it's without judgment. So that's the first stance that we have to take is rather than judging the chaos around us, we can actually say, right, why is this happening to me? What's going on? Who am I with? What do I do next? You're in, if you like, you're part of a huge orchestra. You're one sound. So where are all the other sounds coming from? And I really have a very strong feeling about arguments. I think arguments are a waste of time. They're very damaging. They're very damaging, and you don't get anywhere. Now, you could have a healthy debate, you could have a magical conversation, you could have a huge conference, but if you get into arguing, then you get into some very negative behavior.
Yes.
And what I really started looking at last year was how do we get past equality? And I didn't mean to get rid of equality. Equality is very important. But equality has been a very, it's been a very female-led agenda. So when I started presenting a keynote, we're saying goodbye equality, hello harmony. I have to say I got very, very good responses from men and from women.
I'm sure a lot of standing ovations too, I believe.
Absolutely. And it's such a simple turning of one word, because equality has been a fight, hasn't it?
Indeed. Indeed.
And it was a necessary fight. You know, we wanted to vote, we wanted to be in the boardroom, we wanted to have rights. But now we've got a lot of those. We haven't got everything, and maybe we need a different conversation. So that's where I came around to this idea of magical conversation, is creating a space that is always contributing, listening, trusting, respecting. It doesn't mean it's always easy, but it means that we listen with an open mind. And we say, I never thought of it that way. That's an interesting perspective, because in fact, men don't see equality the same way as women see equality.
Oh, absolutely. And I think even you make very important points here, a lot of important points here. Equality, if we look at gender equality, often it's we are comparing men to women, right? But
Yes.
men to men also, there is a lot of ego fight.
Yes. I mean, if we went out into nature and we said, well, every tree is a tree and they're all the same, they're all equal. But actually, the trees are not equal. You know, some are very tall, some are very prickly, some are very fiery. And therefore, the notion of equal opportunity, yes, but equality meaning we're the same as men is foolish, I think. And I think it's all about having that conversation about where do we go forward? How do we go forward rather than fighting? And I believe that it's not natural for women to fight. It's natural for women to nurture.
Yes.
And come together. And I think over the journey of equality, we've learned a few rather bad tricks, you know, that we do need to invite men to the table.
And men have to invite us to the table as well. So it should not be left upon us. Men in power must allow a place for women, right? So it goes both ways.
It does go both ways, but one of the things I think is important is that because the world's been created by men, and what I mean by the world, I mean business has been created by men. And, you know, if half the world has women. In fact, there's 3.9 billion women in the world, and 2.2 billion of those women are mothers. And that's not counting the women who are not mothers yet. Now, this makes a significant difference to the journey that a man has designed business to be. So what I want to do is to invite men to the table where women explain their view, and we get invited to men's tables, but not necessarily to be controlled by the men's table. It's like there's a new table. It's a new table of harmony, of synergy, of valuing each other's talents.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I think every single person has a talent and every single person is valuable. Now, whether the business table needs those values, that's a situational thing. And an example of that is that we're not inviting men to have babies.
Of course, that's our, as per gender, this is nature given responsibility we have. And I personally, and that's my personal beliefs, people may agree or not agree, and that's okay. I think there are some gender specific talents and traits, both talents and traits. And women, as giver of life, as nurturers, as mothers, we have a higher emotional bond with people and things around us than
Yes,
men. So men, hunters and gatherers analogy, if we use, things have changed, but some those embedded in our DNA, those qualities are prevalent.
absolutely. And the thing is, I think that's very important to be respectful of. I know there's a lot of congestion in the world about this subject matter, but it's the nature of our journey. And what's interesting is if you ask the audience what word was used to describe women, you will find that men and women will use the word nurture. But if you ask women and men to say what's the main word for men, they will not say nurture. It doesn't turn up in that list. We're designed to be in this world to be nurturers and providers. Now, men can be very gentle and sensitive and looking after us, and women can be very strong and
Yes.
and everything. So that's cool. But the fundamental, even if you're not a mother, I know women are always nurturing their cats, their dogs, their cousins, their nephews, and I mean, it's just a natural side of it. And I think what happened is with us all going into the business world, fighting for equality, we forgot that we can be women. We can be strong women of substance.
I can have conversation on just on that all day long.
Yeah.
Yes, I have heard that over and over in like for my recent work on women leadership. I spoke to men, women globally, people in the powerful positions, and it just came out one way or another that in this competition of equality, we have lost somewhere our that gentle, nurturing nature and have become so we have lost that our sense of femininity in some ways because now we are becoming providers.
Well, that's right. And this is where there's a confusion because we can provide, women can be amazing breadwinners, etc. But what we need to do is to think about, especially since COVID and the breakdown of the fully solid office working, we can redesign the way we work together. We've got AI, we've got home work, we've got hybrid work, we've got all sorts of combinations. The trick is the conversations of understanding. And if you take any word, even the word harmony, and I call it authentic harmony, you still need to ask people, what does that mean to you? Because you'll get a slightly different flavor. It's like if you were asking the orchestra and you asked the violins, are the violins the most important part of the orchestra? Yes, of course. Oh, no, the drums say, we're the most important. No, percussion. No, the brass section. Because we're all playing a part. And once we learn to know, oh, this goes together. You can be what you are, I can be what I am. And this is not just men and women, all our different traits and also our wisdom.
Yes, and wisdom. Let's talk about a little bit more, but I want to ask you a lot of questions. But wisdom part is that is so key, especially in sixth generation at a workplace right now. Baby boomers are still in workplace. Lot of talent, women, men, lot of talent, and the younger generation that's entering workforce years, Gen Zers, grown up in nuclear families, grown up with devices, technologies, and going into a workplace on AI platforms. So there's a huge disconnect between the generations right now are actively engaged in a marketplace, workplace, however we want to format that. The wisdom part, knowledge is plentiful.
Yes.
Knowledge is plentiful. You just type few keywords and you have millions of results in second.
Yeah.
Wisdom. Let's talk about wisdom.
Well, I think it's as you say, knowledge is everywhere. How we use our knowledge comes into our experience. So when we have a good experience, it brings us joy. When we have a not so good experience, it doesn't. And the mixer that's in there, which is our imagination, creates our wisdom. So we are instinctive human beings. And I think we've forgotten what our inner curiosity and imagination and perseverance and determination, all those human elements, that's where our wisdom comes from. So for me, our wisdom says, I will listen to others. I will listen to my sisters. I will listen to my brothers. I will listen to other countries. It doesn't mean I need to be controlled by any of those or that I need to bow down to it. But it doesn't mean I need to fight either.
So you open up your heart and your mind to absorb what other sides, different perspectives, and expand your own.
Absolutely. And this is where the magical conversation comes in, because you listen with no judgment. Now, to start with, some people might have the judgment over men or women because of a bad experience. And sadly, we know that a lot of women in the world are marginalized, abused, etc. But we need to also understand we can't move forward if we're always fighting, because when you're fighting, you're causing somebody else damage, and actually you're damaging yourself.
Yes, I think damage, and as I had mentioned earlier, that when you are attacking someone, doesn't matter, man attacking women or women verbally per se, when you attack the other person, however, in your conversation, the other side is going to be on the defensive. Always. When you are on the defensive, you are going to act in a manner that you want to show that you are protecting yourself first. And depending on that person's wisdom, depending on that person's perception of the moment, their own personal strength, persona, they are going to come out either very calm, collected to nasty, and anything in between. It could be good, right? A lot more.
And this is where the trick is. I'm not implying that one should walk away from everything, that one should not respond confidently and clearly. And obviously, if violence is involved, then to protect yourself, absolutely. And that we know there is unrequited violence in the world, where it is men on women in some areas, domestic violence. We know that gender-based violence is occurring. But if we're going to get past it, we do need to forgive and stand for something different. So that the goal for me in the power of authentic harmony is that if we believe it, we will create it. It doesn't mean to say it will work with everybody. And it may be women on women, it might be men on men. You know, it's having the intention to say, harmony is the blessing that I want to have in my life, as opposed to controlling other people or only getting my way because that's it. You know, there are lots of little caveats around how we can be ourselves, because I'm very keen that we honor our own uniqueness in our style of being.
Yes, and self-respect. I am really tempted to ask you this question on a harmony in conversation and medical conversation. That's a wonderful way to express in our communication, but inner harmony as a human being, people who have gone through traumatic experience, as I mentioned, as we record this episode, we have landslides, fires happening in Hawaii, some parts of Hawaii, and we're seeing uh, forest fires and so much happening at this month, so to speak. That inner harmony is equally important, because if
Yeah,
we're not peaceful in heart, in our own hearts, no matter how much we try to express in our communication or our words, I know it's very difficult for people when they're hurting inside.
absolutely. And this is where the journey within is always the starting place. And I talk about that in my book, that, your value is critical and you need to honor that first. It's the classic, oxygen mask on the plane.
Yeah.
And essentially is that you need to honor yourself, body, before you honor anybody else. And that journey, when you face trauma, you may need help. And then, we have amazing coaches, consultants, therapists who understand this deep trauma that happens when something sudden and disastrous happens. I mean, but the ability to get past it, we know famous examples, Viktor Frankl in Auschwitz, and people who have suffered terrible accidents and lost their legs and then managed to fight back and put prosthetic legs on. We know these stories. It's all about the human will,
Yeah.
the human will to say, no, I am me inside and I'm going to deal with this.
Yes.
And practice. It's practice. You don't become a good musician if you don't practice. So, talk about harmony. We need to practice harmony. So I've got some practice principles in the book. And there's 9 practice principles, which are some of the obvious things like trust, respect, empathy, but also things like perception, perspective, companionship, transparency. And you could add a lot more, but
A lot more. Yes.
you would need to practice your own sense of peace and calm.
Absolutely. So
And
and all that is really important to have those magical conversation. So I think what you're explaining is that something that you call format of magical conversation.
well, you could say that you could have if you're going to have a magical conversation with yourself,
Mm.
no judgment. So don't judge yourself. Don't put yourself down. You
We all
wouldn't.
do. It's first thing we judge ourselves more than we judge others.
Absolutely. So don't judge yourself and don't get angry with yourself. Now, if you do,
Uh-huh.
make sure you find some therapy. Go and sing, go and dance, go and walk in the grass. Do something that makes you return to yourself.
Very beautifully said.
Yeah.
Return to yourself. I love it.
Yes. And as women who have, in general, been marginalized and have had a bad rap, we've got to really stand up, yes, get our voice heard, but not be vitriolic. Let's step above the anger and say, okay, we're really talented. We're women of substance and passion. Let's get this act together. And then start looking at how we can invite new conversations.
So it's a good segue. Why a women-centric lens makes a difference.
Will women make the difference? Yes. What we need to do is to bridge the gap. And when I say that, we've been fighting for equality. So men have kind of got, but if we see it as a bridge, we're looking at, like when you've got a swing bridge, you've got both sides. So we've got to bring that together. Men don't have to be women. Women don't have to be men. But to be honest, most men do not understand a woman-centric journey. They know it on paper, but the truth is women are very complex and very multifaceted, and men are relatively straightforward and simple. And I mean that with love, because men tell me that. They say,
That's
we're very straightforward.
that's the nature way of creating us, right?
Yes. And they love it. They love being action oriented, task focused. And, I get a lot of women who say to me, oh, I'm going to change men. And I go, I wouldn't try that. Why would we want men to change us? We don't need to change men. I believe what we need to do is change the landscape, change the table. We're laying a new table. We're saying this is a table of collaboration, of harmony, of synergy. And if we can do that, you need to understand what we're bringing. And we'd like to match it with what you're bringing.
Yes, as a gender, as a individual, we have our own strengths and we complement what men have and men complement what we have. So wouldn't that be more of a harmonious way of
Yes. And as you can go back to the orchestra.
uh-huh.
The orchestra has, some orchestras have hundreds of people in them. When you see these, but
Yes.
the sound that you get is a harmonious recital, but the music is different. And this the other thing is we want to know who the players are, what we're playing, and why we're playing, and who the audience is. If you take that as a business model, then it's about all the players understanding their customers and what they're attempting to do and putting it together with the music, good intention, and dare I say love, as opposed to fear and control and hierarchy and harshness.
Yes.
Now, I actually don't believe men really want that harsh life. I think some men have just got so used to it. That's the way it is.
And what has been working well, profit centric, and if has been working well, why change it?
Why change it? And that's why, if we accept that equality was never something that men wanted, they had to be demanded of it. And now a lot of men have accepted it, but it's by policy and hierarchy. And we've got to do that. I would love it to be that men go, oh wow, it's so fantastic working with women because they do things that I don't do.
Absolutely. I think that's a generational mindset that it begs attention to have this conversation. And my perception of these matters have been that everybody's so busy in their lifestyles. They are in a rat race or too much to do, their own agenda. No one is paying attention to, hey, we need to kind of step back.
Yes.
Back out of that rat race and look at things differently. What are we teaching? Because we are giving our next generation the examples of how we act and
it is. I'd love to just share an example. In 2018, I interviewed a lot of men and I asked them about men. So this conversation was, what's it like to be a man in this world? When this was in the kind of Me Too era.
Okay.
And they all said, well, we feel a bit over threatened by the Me Too thing, but really we want to just get on and be ourselves. And thank you for asking. So they were all very busy, top men. But they said, wow, nobody's ever stopped and asked me about me. And the last question I asked them, what would you advise a woman to do to manage a man like you? And they said, oh, wow, I never thought about that. But the general answer was, I want to be taken seriously as a man. I do not want to be smothered or seen as a threat.
Okay.
And I want to work with women with that basis. So I don't want to be changed. I just want to work with somebody like a woman. And I think it's very important for women to understand that. We have the opportunity to be the lead voice together with men, not controlling them.
Cooperating. That's my message in my book, is that collaboration, not competition. So
yeah, that's right.
And that's where I say, those positive male role models. Their voice need to be amplified. So it's not always you're the king, but so women say, okay, we're the queens. And then we get into that competition. It's not leading us anywhere. We're not creating the a conscious leaders of tomorrow that I love to talk about. That and I say that always, even in my book and my conversations, that as a mother, if we raise boys and girls, they grow up to be men and women.
Yes.
We're part of the family unit. We're part of the society. We're part of the workplace. There's a better ways to deal with our differences, right? I have so many questions. I want to get to the next question. So let's talk about how do we invite men to our table or synergy and gain mutual results.
I think we have to really step back and recognize that men are valuable to us. Take the equality thing out of it. Just sort of what are the talents that come around the table, and also suggest a core principle of all is valuable. So you start from that proposition. So, for instance, emotional intelligence, integrity, respect, trust, kindness, all those deemed, female kind of words. We want to persuade men that these are useful to them as well. So have the conversation. So when we invite men to the table, we do it with some descriptives that help them be there. So we'd like you to come to the table because we have some really amazing ideas that really will engage you and bring you a win. The men want to win. We can give them a win as opposed to letting them win. That makes sense.
Yes.
And yes. Obviously women do want to win, but when we look at competition, we do it differently. I'll give you an example. When two football teams that are male have a final and one wins, they go absolutely crazy. And the other team sneak off, with their head down to the ground. When two women teams play each other, the winner gets congratulated by the losers.
So I want to put it, just give a spin on that. Instead of a win-lose, we want to create win-win.
Yes, that's right. And also men very much talk in an either or fashion. That's why, they're looking for a win. And I think the expression win-win has been around for a long time, but I have a feeling that men see it in a different way. Whereas women see it as and, oh yeah, you win, I win. Whereas men generally, in their profit motive way, still have that, well, yeah, but I've got to get the most. I got to be the winner. It's a different energy. And what you're doing in your conversations, in your invitation, is you're allowing their conversation to come in. We're not changing people, we're allowing them to all be at the table. So if we hear something that doesn't resonate with us, we actually need to say, that's a very interesting perspective. I didn't quite see it that way, but I can understand that this is where you see it. We're drawing people in who they are, as opposed to saying, no, you've got to be quiet, you've got to obey.
Let me ask you, you spoke with maybe many influential men of power. What do you see or feel that younger men, let's talk about Gen Zers, that they are growing up in a gender blind society right now, and they don't have the same type of extended family touch that my generation, your generation, and most of us in our generation were fortunate enough to have, right?
Yes.
So, how do you see having these types of, per se, magical conversation in a generation that's not communicate very well?
I think that in my experience, it works everywhere. It takes some people a bit of time because basically you're inviting people to, as I say, leave their ego outside the door. And by that, I mean, when you come into the conversation, whether you're Gen Z and you're talking to a baby boomer or a Gen X, you actually come in saying, well, this is a person, this is a human being, and observing, listening, sharing, And I think there's a huge power in different generations really listening to each other. I'm always so impressed when it occurs when it's done with no judgment, because the perception of the younger is that there will be judgment or there will be such a wide gap they can't reach it. So you're looking for a commonality. So what's the commonality between a young man and a middle-aged man?
Mm-hmm.
They're both men. So you're looking at, okay, we've probably got different views on certain things, but there's something that we can find that's our commonality. And that's what I find in more fun exercises I run with clients is, where's the common theme? It might be that you both like pizza, or you've both been to Italy, or you both go the same. I mean, it could be anything, but it's what brings you together so that you can explore a bond. And then once you've got a bond, you can then explore differences. So you might have the younger generation, when they haven't got that sense of belonging, is actually maybe having a magical conversation about what does it mean to belong.
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting way to put it. And do you think that there is generational mindset of boys club type of thing, entitlement? Do you feel that younger generation is even
I think,
we hear
yes,
that gender blind? What?
I think it's very interesting. The whole thing about entitlement is, again, I think it's a conversation one needs to have in sense of what does entitlement mean. Um, you might say that the younger generation are entitled, have entitlement because they understand technology a lot better than I do, you know. But they might look at me and say, "Well, you've got entitlement because you come from Great Britain." Whatever the perception is what I think we should explore. Because if entitlement is creating a block, then it needs exploring. Obviously, if somebody uses entitlement to create a big ego, that is something different. And
Mhm.
that could end up as a fight, an argument. And then we've said we don't do that. So it comes down to the intention. And I think that I do believe we have to pay really good attention to our teens,
Mhm.
because we need to be able to listen to them without possibly understanding them. But you can do that.
Yeah, but it's very difficult. Most parents would say it's very difficult to have conversation with their own teens, right? So let's talk about in many cultures, there is a very big difference in male female power dynamics, right? Treatment and the way one assumes power, the other gender becomes submissive, right? So it's very common. But in our connected world, I like to say in our connected world, we are disconnected.
Well, this is the use of this whole word disconnected or connected is really crucial bit. And that's where when we have cultures where there are very severe penalties for not being equal. I lived in Malaysia for 4 years. Had some experience of that. The
Hmm.
woman was behind the man, but the men that I worked with about women wanted the women to be more assertive. So there's some interesting changes going on. I do feel in my heart is that we've got stuck in lots of predictive conditions, some of which are cultural, are religious, old-fashioned perceptions. I remember my father saying to me, "Oh, you just need to get a job for life, but you don't need one because you're going to be married and have babies." And that was a perception that he had. Now, the kids today won't have that perception. I have two grandchildren who are teenagers, and
Hmm.
they see the world very differently. And my granddaughter will say to me, "Well, you don't know my life, and I don't know yours." Now, that's a very profound statement of exploration, is to say it's okay that I don't know your life, and it's okay that you don't know mine. But where do we fit together?
Where
Where
do
do we
we
have
get?
having
Yeah.
conversations?
So let's
Whatever it is, that is the seed. That's the seed of harmony.
okay. Let's talk about the reverse engineering from a joint custody future. Why, what, when, and who? And I'm sure that this is your area of expertise that you talk about so much. Would love to hear. And how do you see the present and leading into the future from
Oh, that is so important. When I came up with this thought that we could have a joint custody world, I know that many people might resonate with joint custody as a battle because we associate it with divorce.
child custody, so to speak, that most people would associate with.
And it's interesting because I got divorced in my life and I did it the best way of harmony. And yes, we weren't necessarily totally aligned because that's why things changed. But whatever situation we're in, we can set the intention to do it in the best possible way. So I see joint custody as this idea that when we get to the table, when women invite men to this conversation, we're saying we want to share the world. We want to share the world, not just the way it has been, but the way it could be. And that factors in the fact that we will have families. And also it factors in other things like elderly care, disabled care. You know, there's a care factor about us communities that could be factored in to the way we run economies and societies, I believe. And that takes a big mind shift because women are very talented at business. We're very good at multitasking. We're very good at enterprise entrepreneurship, and that's all valuable. We've all got to work that we need to value everything jointly. But we put it on the table and say, right, well, if you guys are very good at this, that's fantastic. We're very good at this. How do those things go together? It's a bit like, I suppose, like making a cake. You know, what's the ingredient? What's the basic? You know, we need flour and sugar and eggs, but everything else could be extra because we're going to make this kind of cake or this kind. And that's, and again, going back to the idea that it's a win-win. So the joint custody is a joyful joint custody. And I think it would take the burden off men thinking that they have to do it all. And
How
they
do
don't.
you letting go some of the power, right? So
Yeah,
when we say of almost 50% of the population, and in many metropolitans, women are making the workforce close to 50%, and
yes.
women who are not in a corporate structure, either agriculture or any other small industries, there are higher number of women are employed or self-employed. So women are contributing to the economy, to the GDP of their nations and societies. And so how do we um, where do we start at having men to acknowledge the contribution women are making?
But I think it's finding, dare I say, this is my journey as well, it's finding the wise men. And I think there are. And I mean, take, for instance, the G100 role with positive masculinity.
Yes.
Every group of women are inviting men to those conversations. We have to get the stories out there. That's one of the things I'm very passionate about. I want wise men to be standing up and saying to other men, okay, this is going to be a much better route going this way.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't got as much as those as we could have. And even in companies where there might be 50% of the employees are women, but at the top, there's less women. So there are less women actually making the agenda of business. And I think I used the expression the other day that it was some businesses are a bit like the Titanic. You know, we believe it's unsinkable, but it's going to go down. And we've got to be consciously aware of we're contributing at all levels. So if you think about the young kids, they have a totally digital mind,
Yes.
much more adapted AI than maybe the baby boomers or the X gen or whatever it is. So use each other's strengths. If we come from that point of view rather than a greed, corrupt, fear-based society, actually things work much better, much quicker.
So I have heard words like power mongering and all kinds of stuff, aggressive and things. And as you talk about magical conversations and uh, authentic harmony, so the words like power mongering and aggression don't belong.
Well, again, I think, words have cycles. I mean, I'm not going to say that we could ever get rid of negative words because they're there, they're the counterbalance. So how do we know aggression as opposed to passiveness? How do we know hot from cold? So we're looking, but if we look at the human condition in a healthy, harmonious, excited, enthusiastic state, you solve the mental health problems, you solve the economy problems, you solve the social problems. I know it's a long call, but I think that when we've experienced something extremely traumatic, which was aggressive, we need to really look at something that I saw in a book where the first level of healing is to forgive the unforgivable.
Oh my goodness. Forgive the unforgivable. Oh, I think this is very hard for most people. Even
It's very hard, but this actually comes from a North American Indian tribal sort of notion. If we're going to be healed, we have to forgive the unforgivable. Now, that might mean that if you've got PTSD, you have to go for therapy. But once we forgive the unforgivable, we are able to move to the next level of healing. Now, the most unforgivable thing in the world is abuse against women.
really,
I mean, we
but
know. So being able to forgive the unforgivable means that when men and women get to the table, we want to be able to talk about, not necessarily talk about the violence, but talk about what does it mean to have a harmony like, because if you have a harmonious community, you won't have violence. It doesn't work.
so let me ask that if we are going to have that type of conversation and we come to the table, so we come in with a clean mind, not with
Yes.
some perceptions of or have any hidden agenda of
Yes.
or a generational mindset. So there's a work needed for both, not just for women but men also, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
And in fact, there's a huge number of groups of men really getting to understand men. And I got that when I was interviewing all these men. It was so rewarding because they were so honest. And they said, "Oh my God, nobody asks us." No,
Oh, yes, yes.
no, it's kind of the obvious, Rita, but if we have the conversation not aggressively, but in any word that comes up, we have a magical conversation. So let's take a word like collaboration.
Mm.
Now, collaboration does not mean the same thing to everybody. For
Oh,
some people,
definitely.
it might be we're going to be happy, clappy, dancing, hugging. And for somebody else, it might mean, oh, we're just going to have a good conversation, go to the pub, have a beer.
Or other people would accept whatever we have to offer.
Yeah, and
That could be
there's some people who would say, well, I love collaboration as long as everybody does it my way.
so let's talk about the positive masculinity, power of women, and the future hope for generations to come. I love this question.
Well, the interesting thing about positive masculinity is that, again, it resonates with men, but of course, women also have some masculine energy in them. But I think it's owning the masculine energy of the world, which has got a bad rap because it has been associated with aggressive behavior in men, but it's not actually true. So when we look at positive masculinity, it's about saying, how can men be men and be kind, to be caring, to honor women? And therefore, especially in cultures where they've grown up with this idea that sadly hitting a woman is okay or worse, that's where we've got a long haul to come back. But
Mhm.
then you get into baseline stuff about humanity and human care. And obviously there are some places in the world where this is very hardwired. And I'm not saying that we can go in there and cure it with the conversation, but we can start really shifting it. So the positive masculinity has actually been a charter that's been signed by 6 presidents in Africa to say we're going to stop violence against women and girls. Whether that's happening at the rate that we would like it to happen, I don't know yet, but it is a good stance. So if we can put a positive word to anything, we shift it from the idea of toxic or negative masculinity, which is the damage side of the equation, which we don't want. So having elevated men, and this is a really important part, is that the men who've come towards us now enjoy the idea of being positive masculinity kind of guys. So rather than saying, we want equality and you give it to us, you know, we're not pointing fingers. We're saying,
The competition.
come with us, come with us. And be, you know, masculinity and femininity now come together.
So you're
And
saying that
they're both useful.
so you're saying the women should lead that conversation and invite men to come along in harmony. Okay. And if you would like to have this message for younger boys and girls, how would you explain to them? Because they're young, they're growing up, I would say, in a nuclear families with less human touch, extended families that many of us have experienced. So, how do we attract them to harmonious conversations?
What is That's a really interesting perspective, because I'm thinking about with these young kids, they still have their own communities. So whether they got the nuclear family, which to be honest might not be and supportive as we like it to be. So actually it's touching into, I would say to the kids, where do you belong?
Good.
Where do you feel that? And if they say, well, it's at this, when I'm with my mates and we're doing shots or whatever, I'm not going to disapprove what they're doing. I want to look at where they belong, because once they have a sense of belonging, then they will support each other and they can then start understanding what connection is. So you might then have a conversation with them about what does connection mean to you? And what you're doing all the time is you're going below the issue to a value. And I bet you anything, even if you take a marauding group of kids who are maybe doing something that is irritating to an older population, but they're doing it together. So what you're asking them is, what makes you come together?
So that is the word they have known, right? Either playing video games or integrative electronic toys and things. And that's the word they have known. And I always think of that way. Think it from their perspective, what they got, right?
And yeah, and that's critical. We've got to go into their perspective. We don't necessarily have to own that perspective, but we have to value it. We don't even have to understand it, but to value it. Because if they're 16, 17, 18, or whatever age they are, I don't know whether you remember, I remember when I was 16, I thought I knew everything. I wasn't going to get told. I mean, I might have been quite obedient because that was the background, but I really, you know, always say you become wiser at 24 than you were at 16.
Yes.
Right? You think you're wise.
Yes. So I think these conversation and messaging has to be very prevalent, especially coming out of wise men, because women, we can do our job, but I think the responsibility does lie on men's side as well, because we
Yes.
alone cannot do it, right? As I say, we're part of the family with men and women, we're part of the community or society or workplace, and I don't like the gender wars.
No.
How do we collaborate? Your message, my message, in some ways we are going the same destination,
Definitely.
right?
Definitely.
In the same destination. So it's not a competition or equality war, but
It's,
coming together.
it's not. And one of the things that I think we need to touch on is that when women don't get on with each other, which happens, men find that even more confusing, because they've been given this remit, oh, we need equality. And then they see us actually not getting on or being too aggressive, singularly, it sends the wrong message. So I'm very keen at the moment, and I love your work, Ritu, is that women need to understand that we're not all the same and we bring different values to our table. So even if we have a table which is all women,
Yes, and my own interviews with men and women, and I have heard this over and over, and my own experiences and witnessing that women come in their own way,
oh yes,
right? So I'm not hesitant to talk about it because these are facts. So if we acknowledge the facts and we acknowledge that, okay, we need to change this, not
we need
accusing
we
anyone.
need to. And I think the same actions go. You've got to go to one core element. So if we take harmony, as that's, ask women, what does harmony look like between women? What does it look like between men and women? What does it look like between old and young? What does
Yes,
it look like between the East and the West? I mean,
yes.
once you start these very simple conversations, you're not talking about issues, you're talking about baseline values.
Mm. And what I have observed, when people agree, and I'm sure you will, the conflict between, say, same gender, women to women, parent to child generation, there is more conflict than grandparent to grandchild generation. So there is more love and harmony there. So I always want to say that we need to tap into the power of the older generation and pass the baton to the younger generation.
Well, that's right. But all the way down the line, it's very much about stepping outside of yourself
Mm-hmm.
in terms of judgment, because some older people, and I'm old, can be very judgmental. And I got to make the point that being strongly viewed or having an opinion, that's okay. It's when you make it an absolute judgment or you make it a critical comment that
Mm-hmm.
is damaging. So somebody asked me, what is toxic behavior? And I said, it's any word, thought, or deed that damages somebody else because it damages you.
Yes, very true. Very true. Dr. Pauline, it had been such a wonderful conversation. And before we part, I would like to ask parting words, words of wisdom you would like to share with the audience.
I think my main point is that getting to know yourself should be a journey of love, whatever your circumstance, because your journey of life and love is forever. So however long you live, whether it's many decades or only a few, get to understand yourself. And that might not always go smoothly, but get to know yourself. That is your personal journey. Nobody else is going to do it, only you. But your superpower is understanding that other people are different to you. So your superpower is allowing your relationship with others to be multiple.
So I want to just piggyback on your comments as superpower. So we all have that within us that we need to acknowledge.
Yes.
We have the healing, as you had mentioned earlier, the words of wisdom from Native Americans, Native American cultures, to forgive the unforgivable and
Yes.
recognize your superpower. That is a superpower, really. I see that because most of us do not have that much power to forgive the unforgivable. So all of that, such a wonderful conversation, and I am sure that we will be talking more in future, and I wish you so much success with your authentic harmony, your flagship courses, programs, and we will love to hear more from you in near future. And thank you so much for being part of a Women of Power podcast episode today.
Thank you. I really, really enjoyed this, and we will take it further. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that information our guest has shared is helpful and you are taking away valuable tips and knowledge. We are committed to supporting women and building cause driven businesses that create positive impact in their communities. Join us in the movement for change. Take action now and be part of Let's Come Together movement. Together, we can recognize, celebrate, and empower women who are making a difference in today's economy. Connect with passionate and powerful women, collaborate on cause-driven businesses, and build a better future for our communities. Let's advance sustainable goals for the people, planet, and prosperity. Join the Let's Come Together movement, a private community, today and be catalyst for change in creating and raising conscious leaders of tomorrow. Thank you.